Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real tonight. Life will hand you moments that shake you, hurt you, and test you down to your core, especially when someone you trusted, someone you loved, someone you gave a piece of your heart to ends up being the one who wounds you. But here's the part most people don't understand. When a man hurts you, you don't always need to argue, you don't need to prove your worth, and you don't need to beg him to see what he should have appreciated from the start. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to stay silent and let that silence echo through every corner of his life until regret becomes louder than anything you could have said. Ladies and gentlemen, let me break something down in a way that hits home, because too many people misunderstand silence. Too many people think silence means you gave up, that you're scared, that you're weak, or that you don't know what to say. But silence, when it's chosen not, force becomes one of the strongest positions a person can ever stand in. Especially a woman, especially when her heart's been hurt. When a man hurts you, silence is not you shrinking. Silence is you rising. Silence is you stepping into a strength that doesn't need noise to be powerful. And sometimes silence becomes the loudest message you will ever send. You see, the world is loud, arguments are loud, pain is loud, disrespect is loud, but healing, strength, self-control, those things don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they sit quietly, sometimes they simply walk away without a single explanation. And that's why silence holds so much power, because it forces the other person to confront what they were trying to avoid. It creates a space where excuses can't cover the truth anymore. It blocks a man from hiding behind your emotional reaction. When you go silent, you remove the chaos he used to hide in. Now he has to deal with the reality of what he did. Silence turns the lights on in a room he's been trying to keep dark. People always assume the person talking the loudest is the strongest, but that's not true. The strongest person in the room is the one who doesn't need to prove anything, the one who doesn't need to convince anyone, the one who doesn't need to raise their voice just to show they're hurt. Real strength is steady, it's calm, it's grounded. When a man hurts you and you respond with silence, that's not weakness, that's emotional control. And emotional control is a superpower. Arguments might feel satisfying in the moment, but they rarely change anything. Silence, on the other hand, makes people notice what they took for granted. It forces reflection. It forces accountability. It forces the truth to come forward without you saying a word. Let me speak from a man's perspective for a second. Men know when they messed up. They know when they crossed the line. They know when they push too far, but many times they don't fully feel it until the woman they hurt stops reacting. That silence hits different. Because as long as you're arguing, yelling, explaining, trying to fix things, he still feels like he has access to you. Like he still has room in your heart, like the door is cracked open. But when you go silent, that door slams shut. And every man deep down fears the moment when a woman who once cared stops caring enough to speak. Silence is powerful because it communicates without confronting. It says, I'm not wasting my words anymore. It says, I'm done repeating myself. It says, you know what you did, and I'm not carrying the weight of it for you. Silence shows maturity. It shows restraint. It shows that you value yourself enough not to lower your standards by engaging in emotional battles that drain you. A woman who chooses silence is a woman who has discovered her worth. She understands that peace is priceless, and no man, no matter how much she loved him, deserves the privilege of disturbing her peace twice. You ever notice how after an argument, the person who gets quiet first is the one who gains the upper hand? That's because silence forces the other person to confront themselves, to sit with their guilt, to sit with their choices, to sit with the version of themselves they tried to hide behind excuses. Silence makes a man replay the situation over and over in his mind. It makes him question his actions. It makes him rethink his decisions. Silence leaves him alone with the truth, and trust me, that's the last place a man wants to be if he's done something wrong. Silence is not passive. It's intentional. It's strategic. It's choosing not to give energy to something that's beneath your dignity. When a man hurts you and you stay silent, you're not letting him get away with it. You're letting him face it. You're letting him feel the consequences of his behavior without cushioning the blow. You're letting him walk through the emotional fallout that he created. And he will feel it. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in the moment, but eventually the silence will turn into a mirror that shows him exactly what he lost. And let me tell you something else. Silence protects you. It gives you space to think clearly. It gives you space to heal without reopening wounds. It gives you space to breathe, to regain your sense of self, to remember who you were before the pain. Silence gives you time to decide what you truly want, not based on emotions, not based on anger, but based on clarity. Because reacting in the heat of the moment is human, but responding after sitting in silence is wise. There's a reason the strongest storms end in calm. There's a reason the deepest waters make no sound. There's a reason the most powerful people don't always rush to speak. Silence is strength because it requires discipline. It requires patience. It requires confidence. And it requires a deep belief that you don't need validation from the person who hurt you. You don't need their apology to define your worth. Your silence becomes the boundary they never thought you'd enforce. It becomes the distance they never imagined you'd create. And it becomes the regret they will eventually feel when they realize that the woman who once spoke to them with love now speaks to them with silence. Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in life when silence becomes the teacher nobody was expecting. You can talk, you can yell, you can cry, you can explain yourself 100 different ways, and somehow it still doesn't reach the heart of the person it's meant for. But the moment you go quiet, the moment you shift your energy inward instead of outward, the moment you walk away from the noise, that's when everything starts to change. That's when a man begins to see what he couldn't see when you were still present, still giving, still showing up. A man realizes the value of a woman, not when she's loud, not when she's arguing, not when she's complaining, but when she's gone silent and her absence starts speaking for her. You see, presence is something people take for granted, especially men. When a woman is loving, supportive, forgiving, understanding, a man can get comfortable. He gets used to the softness, the patience, the warmth she brings. He assumes she'll always be there, always picking up the pieces, always giving him chance after chance. But what he doesn't understand, what he almost never understands, is that a woman's presence is not guaranteed. Her love is not infinite. Her patience is not bottomless. And the day she stops talking, the day she stops asking questions, the day she stops trying to fix things, that's the day her absence starts teaching him everything he refused to learn. There's something powerful about a woman's absence. When she's no longer calling, no longer texting, no longer checking in, no longer waiting up, no longer trying to understand what went wrong. That silence becomes a message louder than any conversation you ever had. It's like the air shifts. Everything feels different. The world gets a little heavier. And a man who once ignored her voice suddenly starts craving it. He starts noticing the quiet. He starts feeling the emptiness she used to feel. Because when the noise stops, the truth gets louder. The truth about how much she did. The truth about how much she supported. The truth about how much she loved. The truth about how much he took for granted. Men are funny creatures sometimes. When a woman is available, they don't always appreciate her. When she's loving, they don't always recognize the blessing. But remove her from the picture for just a moment. Her energy, her laughter, her presence, and suddenly everything feels off balance. Suddenly the house feels colder. The mornings feel emptier. The days feel longer. And that absence starts whispering things into his soul. It whispers, "You should have treated her better." It whispers, "You shouldn't have taken her kindness lightly." It whispers, "She was the one holding everything together." Absence is a mirror, and in that mirror, a man sees all the things he never wanted to admit. When the noise stops, regret begins. When the woman who used to be there isn't there anymore, a man starts replaying every moment in his head, not because you reminded him, not because you explained it again, not because you tried to convince him, but because your silence forced him to sit with the consequences of his actions. Your absence turns his world into a classroom, and the lesson is simple. She mattered. She mattered more than you knew. She mattered in ways you never paid attention to. She mattered in ways that now feel painfully obvious. You ever notice how people only realize the value of something after it's gone? That's because absence turns memory into clarity. The things he ignored start shining like neon lights. The things you did effortlessly become heavy in his hands. The effort you put in becomes undeniable. And suddenly, everything he overlooked hits him like a wave. It's not your words that make him realize it. It's the quiet. It's the missing warmth. It's the missing energy. It's the missing love that once felt automatic but now feels unreachable. A woman's absence teaches a man what her presence never could, not because she wasn't clear, not because she didn't communicate, but because he was too comfortable to listen. Absence interrupts comfort. It breaks routine. It forces a man to pay attention, not because he wants to, but because he can't avoid it anymore. The silence becomes a reminder. The distance becomes a warning. And the lack of access becomes the consequence he never thought would come. Ladies, let me tell you something true. Your absence has a voice, and it speaks to a man in ways he can't escape. It speaks in the empty spaces. It speaks in the unanswered calls. It speaks when he reaches for you and you're no longer there. It speaks when he tries to repeat the old patterns, but there's no one on the other end. Your absence is not just physical, it's emotional. And a man feels that more deeply than you think. He might not show it at first. He might try to act like he's fine. But sooner or later, that quiet starts pressing on his chest like a weight he can't shake off. And here's the truth. A man who truly cared will feel your absence long before he admits it. He'll feel the shift. He'll feel the distance. He'll feel the regret rising slowly in his throat. Because once the noise stops and the chaos fades, he's left alone with the reality of who you were and how he treated you. And that absence becomes the teacher, the judge, and the reminder all at once. So never underestimate the power of stepping back, of going silent, of walking away peacefully. Your absence is not empty, it is full of truth. And a man will always, always realize the value of the woman he hurt when her silence finally speaks louder than her presence ever had the chance to. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that life teaches you the hard way. Emotional control is one of the strongest powers a woman can have. Not beauty, not charm, not even intelligence, though those are blessings. The real power, the power that separates a woman who rises from a woman who gets drained, is emotional control. It's the ability to feel everything deeply and still choose your response, not react out of pain. It's the ability to be hurt and not let that hurt turn you into someone you're not. And when a man hurts you, that emotional control becomes your shield, your strength, and your advantage. A woman's heart is built different. She loves with intention. She gives with sincerity. She believes with hope. So when she gets hurt, it's not a small wound, it goes deep. And the natural reaction is to respond in the heat of the moment, to defend herself, to demand answers, to express the confusion, the disappointment, the betrayal. But here's the truth. Reacting emotionally gives the power to the person who caused the hurt. It hands them access to your inner world, your softest parts, your vulnerability. And sometimes the very man who hurts you doesn't deserve to be that close to your heart anymore. Emotional control isn't about acting like you don't care. It's not about hiding your feelings or pretending the pain didn't cut you. It's about choosing not to let that pain dictate your behavior. It's about saying, I feel this, but I will not lose myself in it. Emotional control means understanding that not every action deserves a response, and not every hurt deserves your energy. The moment you master that, you become a woman no man can break, no situation can shake, and no betrayal can destroy. Let me tell you, from a man's point of view, when a woman loses control emotionally, a man often dismisses her. He says she's dramatic, emotional, overreacting. Not because she is, but because it's easier for him to ignore her pain when she's expressing it in ways he doesn't want to deal with. But when she stays calm, collected, composed, even when she's hurting, he has to listen. He has to pay attention. He has to face the truth. Emotional control exposes him. It shows him the maturity, the strength, the grace he underestimated. And that is something a man cannot ignore. A woman who controls her emotions isn't cold, she's wise. She knows her worth. She knows that if she reacts every time someone triggers her, she gives them power. But when she stays centered, she keeps that power for herself. Emotional control is your way of saying, I refuse to let you pull me into chaos. It's your way of saying, I am stronger than the storm you created. It's your way of saying, I won't let you decide how I show up in this moment. People think silence is weakness, but silence paired with emotional control, that's strength on another level. That's a woman who can stand in the middle of heartbreak and still walk with dignity. That's a woman who can face disrespect and still choose self-respect. That's a woman who can feel the pain but not become the pain. Emotional control means you are no longer reacting to life. You are responding to it with intention. Let me give you something real. When a woman stops reacting emotionally, everything changes. Suddenly the man can't manipulate her with guilt. Suddenly he can't provoke her into arguments to deflect the truth. Suddenly he can't rely on her love to smooth over his mistakes. When she gets control of her emotions, she gets control of the situation. And let me tell you, ladies, nothing scares a man more than a woman he can no longer emotionally shake. You want to know when a man starts respecting you again? When he sees that he can't push you around emotionally. When he sees that you don't respond to disrespect with desperation. When he sees that you don't chase clarity from someone who brought confusion. Emotional control is not just power, it's protection. It protects your peace, your energy, your future. It keeps you from saying things you'll regret. It keeps you from fighting battles that were never yours to fight. It keeps you from pouring love into places that don't value your heart. When you control your emotions, you stop letting the wrong people pull you into their world. You stop explaining yourself to someone who refuses to understand. You stop trying to convince someone of your worth when they were too blind to see it. Emotional control is what frees you. It's what allows you to stand tall even when your heart is hurting. It's what tells the world, I am not defined by what happened to me. I am defined by how I rise from it. A woman in emotional control is a force. She doesn't break the moment someone disappoints her. She doesn't crumble because a man couldn't see her value. She doesn't lose herself because someone failed to love her correctly. Instead, she steps back. She reevaluates. She rebuilds herself quietly. And in that rebuilding, she becomes stronger, wiser, and more powerful than before. A man may hurt you, but your emotional control determines how that hurt shapes you. It determines whether you stay stuck or whether you grow. It determines whether you let the situation break you or build you. And when you choose emotional control, you choose yourself. You choose your peace over your pain. You choose your future over your frustration. You choose your dignity over the drama. That, ladies and gentlemen, is real power. Not the power to hurt back, not the power to argue louder, but the power to rise above, the power to move forward with grace, the power to stand strong in silence and let your emotional control speak louder than your wounds ever could. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something honest, something straight from a man's perspective. Nothing gets to a man more than realizing he can no longer provoke a reaction out of a woman he once had emotional influence over. You see, when a man hurts you, he expects a response. He expects anger. He expects tears. He expects disappointment. He expects you to question him, confront him, explain yourself, or demand answers. Why? Because your reaction makes him feel relevant. Your reaction tells him he still has a place in your heart. Your reaction shows him that he still has some kind of hold on you. But the moment you stop reacting, the moment he can't reach you emotionally anymore, that's when regret begins to creep into his mind like a shadow he can't escape. A man cannot stand losing emotional access to a woman. That access means everything. It means he can predict her responses. He can pull her into conversations. He can stir emotions in her to distract from what he's done. As long as he can provoke you, he convinces himself that you're still there, still invested, still attached, still affected. But when you stop reacting, you break that illusion. You break the connection he thought he controlled. You break the grip he believed he had over your emotions. And that's when it hits him. He lost something real. Men often hide behind the idea that they don't care. They act like your feelings don't affect them, like your hurt doesn't matter, like your tears don't mean anything. But let me tell you something true. Men measure their importance by the emotions they can stir in a woman. When they can upset you, they feel powerful. When they can get you to argue, they feel in control. When they can make you chase answers, they think they still matter. But when you respond with silence, when you stay calm, when you hold your peace, that shakes a man more than any words you could ever say. A woman's reaction is fuel. It fuels a man's ego, even when he's wrong. But removing that reaction, that's like cutting off the supply. It forces him to see himself without the emotional drama he used to hide behind. It forces him to face the reality of his actions without you cushioning the blow. And when he can't provoke you anymore, he starts asking himself questions he never asked before. He starts wondering why you're not responding. He starts wondering if you stopped caring. He starts wondering if someone else has your attention. He starts wondering if he pushed you too far. And those questions are the birthplace of regret. You want to know why a man regrets hurting a woman? It's not because she cried. It's not because she argued. It's not because she yelled. It's because one day she stopped doing all of that. The silence hits him when the noise is gone. He becomes uncomfortable with the stillness he once wished for. The same quiet he thought he wanted becomes the quiet he fears the most, because now he has to face the truth that you're no longer emotionally available to him. A man feels regret when your energy shifts, not when your voice rises, when your vibe changes, not when your tone changes, when you become unbothered, not when you become emotional. Men have a hard time dealing with a woman who becomes emotionally neutral toward them. She's no longer hurt by him, no longer trying to understand him, no longer explaining her emotions. She's just done. And that calmness, that peace, that lack of reaction, that's what breaks him. Because once a man realizes he can no longer provoke you, he starts longing for the version of you he took for granted. He misses the way you cared. He misses the way you used to get upset. He misses the way you used to fight for the relationship. He misses the passion, even if the passion came out in frustration. To him, all of that meant you still wanted something with him. But the indifference, the silence, the emotional distance, that tells him you've moved on in ways he never expected. And let me tell you something that men will never admit out loud. Regret doesn't hit them immediately. It hits them slowly, steadily, like a delayed punch. At first, he thinks you're just upset. Then he thinks you're just giving him space. Then he thinks you'll eventually reach out. Then he thinks he can reach out to you and everything will go back to normal. But when he finally tries, when he calls and you don't answer, when he texts and you don't rush to respond, when he shows up and you're not moved, that is the moment regret becomes real. That's when it lands. That's when it hurts him. That's when he understands what he lost. A man who can no longer provoke a reaction realizes he no longer has a place in your heart. And that realization is painful because now he has to live with the knowledge that he pushed you to a place he never thought you'd go. He took you to a point where your emotions shut down. He pushed you into silence. And that silence becomes the echo of everything he failed to give you. Ladies, understand this. Your reaction is valuable. That's why you must choose wisely who gets to trigger it. But your non-reaction, that is priceless. That is where your power lies. The moment a man cannot provoke you is the moment he starts regretting how he treated you. You didn't break him with tears. You didn't break him with anger. You broke him with emotional control, with peace, with silence. And trust me, there is no greater regret for a man than realizing he lost a woman he can no longer reach, not even emotionally. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real. Silence is not just the absence of sound. Silence is a space, a powerful, uncomfortable, undeniable space. A space where truth finally has room to breathe, where excuses fall away, where people have to sit with the weight of their own decisions. And when a woman goes silent after being hurt, she's not avoiding the situation. She's not running from the truth. She's letting the truth reveal itself without her having to say a single word. Silence creates the kind of space that forces a man to face himself. And let me tell you, that's a space most men would rather avoid. You see, when emotions are high and voices are raised, a man can hide behind the noise. He can point fingers, shift blame, minimize the situation, or turn everything into an argument. But when the woman he hurt becomes silent, there is nowhere left for him to hide. Silence removes the chaos. Silence removes the back and forth. Silence removes the distractions. And now he's left alone with nothing but his choices staring him in the face. That space, that space is where accountability begins. People don't reflect when they're busy arguing. They reflect when the house gets quiet, when the phone stops buzzing, when the text messages stop coming, when the person they hurt steps back and stops engaging. That's when their mind starts replaying everything. That's when regret starts whispering. That's when accountability is no longer avoidable. Silence forces a man to confront the reality he once tried to ignore. It becomes a mirror that shows him not who he pretends to be, but who he really was in that moment when he hurt the woman he should have protected. A man can dismiss your words, but he cannot escape the truth he hears in your silence. Because silence makes him ask the questions he refused to ask when you were still talking. Silence makes him wonder why you're not reacting. Silence makes him rethink everything he did to drive you to this point. And the thing about reflection is this: it doesn't happen on your timeline. It happens when the noise is gone, when his ego gets quiet, when the distractions he used to avoid accountability fade away. Then, slowly, painfully, he begins to see clearly. When a woman goes silent, she creates emotional distance. And that distance becomes the room a man needs to finally recognize the damage he caused. It's like holding up a mirror, but instead of pointing it at him, you simply step back and let him walk into his own reflection. Silence invites him to sit with what he's done, to feel the loss, to feel the shift in energy, to feel the consequences of taking your presence for granted. And trust me, a man can act tough all he wants, but he feels that shift. He feels that silence. He feels that absence of your voice more than he'll ever admit out loud. We live in a world where everybody wants immediate reactions. They want instant explanations, instant apologies, instant fixes. But real accountability doesn't grow in heat. It grows in quiet. It grows in the moments where the person who was wrong can't lean on arguments or emotional confusion to escape the truth. Silence breaks down the pride, the ego, the defensiveness. It strips away the walls we hide behind. That space you create, it becomes the place where accountability finally gets planted. A man who hurts a woman often expects a reaction. He expects confrontation. He expects emotional waves. But when he gets silence instead, he feels something different. He feels the consequences. He feels the shift in your energy. He feels the emptiness that used to be filled with your love, your attention, your presence. And that feeling, whether he wants to acknowledge it or not, forces reflection. It forces him to think about his role in the situation. It forces him to acknowledge the truth he avoided when things were loud. Silence also gives you space, and that's just as important. It gives you space to think, to process, to heal. It gives you space to step away from the chaos and reclaim your peace. And when you're not reacting emotionally, you can finally see the situation clearly. You can see what you want. You can see what you won't tolerate. You can see the truth behind his actions without the fog of arguments clouding your judgment. Silence benefits you, but it also demands accountability from him. Let me tell you something from experience. Men reflect differently than women. Women reflect in the moment. Men reflect in the aftermath. When the dust settles, when the emotions calm, when the silence stretches longer than he expected, that's when he starts thinking about the role he played. That's when the memory of your silence becomes louder than your words ever were. That's when he starts feeling what you felt, not because you explained it, but because he finally has space to understand it. Silence is not a punishment. It's a boundary. It's a declaration that you're not going to participate in the disrespect. It's a statement that says, you handle your truth. I'm not carrying it for you anymore. And while he sits in that space, while he feels that distance, while he wrestles with the weight of what he did, he begins to understand the value of what he's losing. And here's the part most people don't talk about. The space silence creates is where change begins. Accountability leads to reflection, and reflection leads to growth. If he is capable of growth, silence shows you who he really is. Will he step up and take responsibility? Will he ignore the truth and pretend nothing happened? Will he reflect and try to be better? Or will he avoid the space you created because he can't handle the truth inside it? Silence reveals all of that without you having to lift a finger. So yes, silence creates space. Space for him to face himself. Space for you to protect yourself. space for the truth to rise to the surface without being drowned out by noise. And in that space, accountability is born, reflection is born, and sometimes regret is born too. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about silence, we're not talking about weakness. We're talking about one of the greatest, most underestimated forms of power a woman can ever possess. When a man hurts you, whether intentionally, carelessly, or simply because he wasn't mature enough to handle the weight of your heart, your silence becomes the lesson he never saw coming. Because silence is not empty. Silence is not surrender. Silence is not about ignoring him or pretending you don't feel anything. Silence is about controlling what you choose to give energy to and refusing to fight battles that don't deserve your spirit. A woman's silence is the doorway to a man's realization, and it speaks louder than any argument, any crying, or any attempt to explain your worth ever could. See, when a man hurts you, he expects certain reactions. He expects anger, shouting, long messages, questions, explanations. He expects you to beg for clarity or closure. He expects you to try to fix things even when he's the one who broke them. But when you don't give him any of that, when you step back and choose stillness instead of chaos, when you give him nothing but quiet self-respect, you flip the script. Because now you're not reacting emotionally, you're responding with dignity. Now you're not fighting for him, you're standing for yourself. Silence becomes the mirror he has to face. In that mirror, he sees everything he took for granted: your kindness, your patience, your presence, your love, your effort, your consistency, your loyalty, your time. And once a man sees the absence of what you provided, regret always follows. You know why? Because a man can ignore your words, but he cannot ignore your silence. He can debate your opinions, but he cannot debate your distance. He can dismiss your tears, but he cannot dismiss your absence. Silence forces him to sit alone with his choices, and that's where truth hits him the hardest. When you step back, he realizes just how loud your presence actually was. He realizes you weren't doing too much. You were holding everything together. He realizes that the things he calls small were actually the things that kept him grounded. He realizes that the woman he thought would always be there may not be there anymore. But let me tell you the deeper truth. Ladies, silence isn't about him regretting anything. Silence is about giving yourself space to breathe, to heal, to gather your power, and to remember who you are without the pain he caused. It's about stepping away from emotional noise so you can protect your peace. Because your peace is priceless, and the moment you learn to protect it, you stop giving people permission to disturb it. Silence is where your strength meets your wisdom. Silence is where you stop trying to change a man and start choosing yourself. Silence is where you stop chasing explanations and start valuing your energy. Silence is where you realize that the version of you he hurt is not the version of you that will rise. And ladies, let me remind you, silence does not mean you are suffering. It means you are rising. It means you are reclaiming your power. It means you are letting your actions speak. It means you are letting God do the talking for you. Because sometimes the greatest clapback is no clapback at all. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without a sound, without drama, without trying to prove anything. When you walk away silently, a man starts replaying everything in his mind, what he said, what he did, what he failed to do, and what he pushed away. And that replay becomes the regret he created for himself. A real man will feel that silence. A real man will respect that silence. A real man will understand that silence is not punishment, it's a boundary. It's the boundary that says, I will not fight to be valued. It's the boundary that demands maturity, accountability, growth. The wrong man will see your silence as distance. The right man will see it as a warning. The man who doesn't care will let it pass. The man who truly loves you will correct himself because of it. But the most important part of all this is you. Silence builds your character. Silence builds your emotional discipline. Silence builds your intuition. Silence builds your confidence. Because when you can stay silent in the face of disrespect, when you can walk away without losing your calm, when you can detach without losing your soul, you have mastered something most people never learn. You have mastered self-control. And the woman who has self-control is the woman who becomes unstoppable. Silence also protects your dignity. A man may hurt you, but you decide whether you lose yourself along the way. When you choose silence, you choose not to let pain dictate your behavior. You choose not to let emotions lower your standards. You choose to respond like a woman who knows her worth rather than react like someone desperate for validation. This is when your silence becomes your shield. It protects your heart from further damage. It protects your spirit from chaos. It protects your future from repeating the same mistake. And one day, trust me, he'll remember your silence. He'll think about the moment you stopped arguing. He'll think about the moment you stopped explaining. He'll think about the moment you stopped trying. And that memory will sting far more than any words you could have spoken. Because silence is the moment he realizes he hurt a woman who truly cared. And regret is the moment he realizes he pushed away the woman he should have cherished. So don't ever be afraid to stay silent. Because your silence isn't empty, it's full of meaning, full of strength, full of truth, and full of the power he never expected you to have.